This is Kreskin, and I have got to share with you some of my lifelong experiences because they reflect my life, and that is the fact that if you walked into my library, and I read profusely, and when if I'm home by myself, I'll read about 4 books in an evening, but I've written 21 books. And the interesting thing is, and people comment to me about some of my writings because my perspectives have changed through the years. My first book, the Amazing Kreskin, which has an old classic picture of me, a young picture of early in my career that I wrote some 50 years ago. It dealt with my performances and much of my career because I was known then not only as a mentalist, but also a hypnotist, and on. There were other quasi-titles to it as well. But the book dealt with what was happening on the stage, what was happening with audiences, and of course I was already doing the Johnny Carson show frequently, so I had rather wild, interesting personal experiences with them. But as I started writing, and I never write fiction, because I'm not a fiction writer, I don't have that gift or skill, but I write about my experiences and what have you. And it was very unusual in those days because I would sometimes create panics and have people seeing UFOs all over the place. I had as many as 30 and 40 people looking in the sky, seeing UFOs and what have you. I'd sometimes paralyze a group of people so they couldn't speak and what have you. And I was performing in a lot of colleges and a lot of schools. And what made it fascinating was that I was also interested in memories and was causing people to recall dramatic issues that took place in their lives. Sometimes I have on stage, and if you heard a little beep right then and there, that was part of my brain. It was just settling down because I hadn't digested some of my food all the way. But at the same time, it caused me to reflect upon these situations. People had accidents in their lives, and sometimes I would dramatically picture the scene and the nature of the accident and some of the healing processes and what have you. And then as time went on, I became more seriously interested in my field, and it became really an integral part of my life. And I started to accent in my earlier books the factor of hypnosis, because I was taking subjects from everywhere, all over the world, and they were volunteering, and hypnotic demonstrations was becoming involved in producing altered states of consciousness, experiences that they never thought they would have, people in a UFO that were segueing downwards because they couldn't stop the way the plane was moving, even though they were just sitting in chairs and what have you. And it became more and more a personal analysis of what I could do with people under hypnosis. But then, the next turning point in my writings became a factor that started haunting me in the first years of my writing books, 21 books. And by the third and fourth book that I would be writing, I started to doubt myself and start to question what was happening in my performances, and was I interpreting them properly? Because something didn't seem quite right about the hypnotic trances that I was producing, about the hypnotic state. And as you read some of the books that followed, you begin to realize that I was questioning what kind of trance these people were in. If they weren't under hypnosis, what kind of trance were they in? Was it a placebo? Was it a short-sighted situation? Or was it a traumatic experience? And don't you know, gradually I discovered something. And by my third and fourth book, it was an exciting thing in my life because I was getting in feuds with prominent authorities on hypnosis, on parapsychology, and what have you. because I started to find out that I could do the same thing that I was producing with a person in a deep hypnotic trance, what you call somnambulism or catalepsy, or the 12 different levels of hypnosis and what have you. In the books that I would show where behaviorists had this long list of different state levels, because down to the 20th level, that was the deepest level of hypnosis. So I could produce the same thing with people wide awake. And it became fascinating to those reading my writings. And people, some of whom gave up their involvement in hypnotic phenomena, gave up their calling themselves professional hypnotists and psychologists that used hypnotherapy and what have you, because they started to realize that there was some kind of truth to what I was saying. And if you could do the same thing without a person in a trance, then what is a trance? And the trance is the powerful figment and control of someone's thinking so that they feel like they're in another world. But the truth of the matter is, intellectually, they are still the same person going in another no specialized state. Then I started offering money. Oh, that became the crazy thing, because there was one hypnotist that took me to trial, and she wanted the $50,000 to $40-some thousand that I was offering for proof of a hypnotic trance. And it was a very dramatic trial, because one of my subjects in the trial, and I had psychologists, had witnesses, and she had a couple of psychiatrists that were there with her witnesses to authenticate that she was right, that she was producing a hypnotic trance. But I had one member, a road manager of mine, and it will hopefully someday go into a movie, because he's ready to mount and put the whole makeup on and what have you, because he came down the aisle during the trial. The judge looked, and I said, I want to introduce you, and I gave his name, a young man. And I said, he's worked for me for years. And they looked at him, and he had this gross outfit on. I'm not saying it was a dress, but he just looked wild, and what he was wearing, instead of a toupee or a top hat, a strange mounting on his head, and his face looked strange and everything else. And I said something which became the turning point of the trial. And lawyers around the world wrote me and said, Kreskin, you may not be an attorney, but you destroyed the case against you, and the judge threw the person suing me out of the auditorium and the psychologist and said, get out of here, don't waste my time, you've tried to make a fool of us. Because, as it turned out, folks, it became clear that these people, well, let's put it this way, one of the great powers of hypnosis, and you look at the 1800s, when hypnotherapy was a powerful form of treatment, one of the great powers was causing a subject to remember vividly details in their past or in an incident, something which I still do today when I'm called in on crime cases. And this one woman who was suing me, I found out she was undergoing treatment, and she was going to a psychologist, psychiatrist. And she came in to the medical building. Oh, someone was following her, and she waited there with the person whom she didn't know. He was standing next to her, and finally he was called in. And when I asked that hypnotist reawaken the entire experience before she entered the psychiatrist's office. The drama was this. My road manager, finding out her schedule, arrived when she arrived, walked in with her. They didn't know each other. He spoke casually to her and commented to her while they were waiting and waiting. And finally she went in, and she did not remember him. Even though he was dressed in this outrageous outfit. Outrageous because that's the way he came to the jury trial. And when the judge saw this, and the people said, yes, that's the way he was dressed, she, with the person she put under hypnosis in the trial, did not remember that incident. And you mean to tell me that somebody, not hypnotized, but somebody with full conscious intellect would not remember such an outrageous experience, and it destroyed her case. That's one of the most powerful incidents I could ever share with you, because as lawyers say to me, Kreskin, you turned a classic case against you into one where you won it all. There are some other books I've written since then. Some of them have been crime cases, which I'll discuss with you from time to time. Fortunately, I survived the attempt to murder me, but not everybody's happy about it because they felt it would be a dramatic chapter. I don't want to imply that this is a road manager that thinks this way. God forbid. But at the same time, I've had some incredibly crazy experiences, including meeting with a group of suspects and my unearthing, because the police had brought them there, and I could not accuse anybody ever of committing a crime. I brought forth the evidence, and in many of the cases, because I was aware of more details, the suspects confessed. They would realize that I was uncovering even things that they hadn't talked about or hadn't been found out about them. But at the same time, I find that the mind is dramatic. I can remember in one case where the person who I was pointing to was one of the murder suspects, and I was with a psychiatrist, not a policeman, and that person attempted to resolve things by murdering me. And as he approached me, and it was very clear, the psychiatrist didn't know what to do, and as he approached me, I simply put my hands up, started speaking to him, and about 7 minutes later, he was lying on the floor, totally conscious. There's only one problem. He couldn't move, he couldn't speak, he couldn't get up, and he could not handle the situation. So folks, my career, even in what I report in books, has been a tremendous adventure. I'm not going to end this here, but in the spirit I have broadcasting, let's just say, to be continued. You know, folks, this is a postscript, not a post-hypnotic suggestion. This is just a postscript because a lot of you, I know, are going to be curious about my writings, and I have people I've known that have read every single book, even psychologists, and they never underwent therapy. But you can look into my books, order them by looking up AmazingKreskin.com. AmazingKreskin.com will enable you to access the material.